but really start thinking about how you can bring donors along and having them understand that overhead is not a sin. Overhead is what pays the rent and keeps the programs running. Systemic issues aren't going to go away because we're tackling the effects of those issues. We really need to tackle the roots, and we really need people to vote and become engaged citizens for these issues to eventually go away. And then also feel free to gently push back on problematic notions that a donor might have. For example, I once had a donor, they said, "Hey, I want to donate 50 used mismatched socks to your organization because I think that you'd be able to use it." First, we don't accept clothing donations. We don't have the infrastructure to ensure that they're bed bug free or anything like that. So that's first. Second, is this the most dignified thing that we are able to provide our service users? And the answer is no in that case, right? So, really having those conversations with your donors will help them become better allies and better advocates for your cause and actually be able to support your service users in a way that is dignified and aligned with the values of community centric fundraising.
Hi, friends! Ever wondered how you could turn your big ideas into results? Together, let's reimagine a better sector, tackle systemic issues, and yes, raise some serious cash. Welcome back to The Small Nonprofit, the podcast where your passion meets action.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about what is community centric fundraising and how can you start applying it in your organization. If you're new here, my name is Maria Rio, and I'm an expert fundraiser with over 10 years of experience. And I'm on a mission to help EDs get more funding without the stress. So let's jump into it. Has your fundraising ever looked like this? So we have the donor who's represented by a white, wealthy older lady, the board member, a white professional corporate guy, and everyone else. So if your fundraising has traditionally looked like this, how can we make it look the opposite? How can we make it so everyone's standing on equal footing? So we have service users, community members, board members, volunteers, and donors all hanging out together, and you can't really tell which one is which. And that's what community centric fundraising is all about. It's about centering equity and bringing everyone along together, not just playing into the white saviorism or the paternalism that is currently baked into the nonprofit industrial complex. So, what are some changes that you can make to turn your organization from the donor centricness to more community centric fundraising? And how can you start identifying those? One big thing that I want you to think about is white supremacy. So, a lot of the problems that arise from the nonprofit industrial complex are born from white supremacy, and covert white supremacy is very common in nonprofits. And moving towards community centric fundraising, you want to be able to identify these things and actually also move towards dismantling them, not only in your fundraising and your outbound communications, but also in your hiring, your board recruitment, the way you treat your staff, the way you engage your service users, all that good stuff. For me, when I'm thinking about white supremacy showing up in nonprofits, I'm thinking of white silence, I'm thinking of the white savior complex, respectability politics, tone policing, paternalism. So, all these things really show up in how we do our work. And community centric fundraising is a way to try to make our work be less harmful. So let's dive right in. What is community centric fundraising? So, this is a growing movement. It's a different model of fundraising that was born out of Seattle. So, Boulay of nonprofit AF, who I'm sure you're all very familiar with, was one of the originators of this movement. And now it's taken off. A lot of people from all different organizations across the world are starting to implement this. And to me, it's really about reimagining how we engage with our community. So, our donors, our volunteers, and our service users, and also our staff in how we move equity forward. Community centric fundraising is guided by 10 principles. Fundraising must be grounded in race, equity, and social justice. Individual organizational missions are not as important as the collective community. Nonprofits are generous with and mutually supportive of one another. All who engage in strengthening the community are equally valued, whether volunteer, staff, donor, or board member. Time is valued equally as money. We treat donors as partners, and this means that we are transparent and occasionally have difficult conversations. We foster a sense of belonging, not othering. We promote the understanding that everyone, donors, staff, funders, board members, volunteers, personally benefits from engaging in the work of social justice. So it's not just charity and compassion. We see the work of social justice as holistic and transformative, not transactional. And we recognize that healing and liberation requires a commitment to economic justice. In short, I want you to think about CCF, community centric fundraising, as a lens. So it is guided by these principles, but it is rooted in community. And because it's about your specific community, it will apply differently to each organization. By working to understand community centric fundraising, though, that will give you the tools, the knowledge, and the bravado to actually go out there and start dismantling oppressive systems in and outside of your organization. Now that we understand what community centric fundraising is, how does this apply to your work? How do you actually apply these 10 principles into fundraising and communications and storytelling and engaging your donors, right? What does that look like? Here I have a bunch of examples to share with you. So, how do we apply CCF? By critically re examining any and every donor centric practice that we've implemented as best practices in our sector. So, here are a few examples of that. You can provide special attention to the recruitment and professional development of Black, Indigenous, or people of color. You can educate your board, leadership, and donors on anti capitalism and anti racism. You can learn about the nonprofit industrial complex and accept that we are part of the problem. We're not just a solution, we're actually also actively contributing to the issues that cause the nonprofit industrial complex. You could be choosy of where you show up and where you take up space. So if you see a panel that's all white speakers, you can choose not to participate in that and you can actually ask them to pass the microphone along to someone else. You could be clear on how your values are operationalized across your organization. So it's nice to have a statement, but what does that look like in actuality? Another thing that CCF organizations do is revisit their gift acceptance policy. So, are you taking money from places that are in direct contradiction with your mission or with the broader goals of social and economic justice? Prioritize the collective mission, revisit your role in public policy work, turn away opportunities for communities that you're not a part of. Rethink your major donor engagement strategy, push back on the problematic, focus on providing dignified programming, revisit any donor centric events or vendors that you might be currently working with and see if those relationships still serve your purpose as you move towards becoming a CCF aligned organization. Focus on dignified storytelling and inclusive design, speaking out against injustice and genocide, and sharing resources openly. So, these are just a few of the examples that you can start thinking of when you're thinking of how you as a fundraiser can move towards community centric fundraising and how your organization can do so more broadly. But let's break it down into more actionable steps. The first step that you're going to want to do is audit what's currently going on. So on the screen, you have two images that I'm showing you right now. You have one where it's a lady, she's painting, she's smiling at the camera, looks pretty good. This one's in full color and I have a check mark on it. So you know that I like this picture as an example of dignified storytelling. At the bottom, we have a person who may be experiencing homelessness. They're sitting on the edge of a building beside a sign and they're being handed some food and they look super grateful for it. This to me is an example of something that is not as dignified because not many people would like to be photographed in their worst moments, especially when they're being asked to showcase gratitude, right? That's not exactly the most comfortable feeling for someone with lived experience. So that's where I want you to start your audit in your storytelling. So, are you promoting any kind of poverty tourism, poverty porn? How are you positioning your donor or your service users? And how do you position the organization? Is your organization being positioned as like changing lives and making a huge impact in people's future if that's not actually the case? Now, if you're changing lives, please tell donors that. But if it's, something like providing hampers, that won't actually change someone's life, right? Like they'll be fed for that amount of time, but they won't be able to retire. They won't be able to go on vacation. They won't be able to pay their rent or pay for their medicine, right? There are systemic issues at play, and we don't want to obscure those by saying our organization is doing everything and anything for every single person that comes in through the door. There are plenty of gaps that we are trying to address in a piecemeal manner through short impact initiatives. But the long impact, the long term change will happen through public policy work. So, really positioning your organization as a tool to support change making is great, but please don't overstate it. When it comes to poverty tourism or trauma porn, I really want you to think about how you're engaging your service users in how they tell their story. For example, do they have a goal sharing their story with you? Do you even know, right? That's a really good question. Like, what is the service user looking to get out of sharing their story with you? Or are they just doing it because you asked them to and they don't feel very comfortable saying no? Ideally, you have consent baked into the process that is informed, consistent, and really explains the process to that person and lets them opt out at any stage of the process. Another thing that you really want to think about is how you have your service users show gratitude, right? So, if they're being filmed, are they being asked really exploitative questions like, what was it like not having food? What was it like living in a shelter? We know the answers to that are going to be very traumatic for the person who's answering them and just not really appropriate. However, this has been seen as donor centric gold since the beginning of time, right? But it's not centering the dignity and autonomy of your service users. So it's at a crossroads with community centric fundraising. So maybe think through, how are you showcasing your programs, either through your imagery, through your videos, through your storytelling? How are you positioning the organization and your service users? Are you saying that service users are these helpless, homogenous group that needs you to save them? How are you talking about your service users and the barriers that they're currently facing? Are you a voice for the voiceless, or are you helping remove barriers that these people might be facing to make their lives easier? Because they're very talented, they're very capable. You don't survive lived experience barriers without being resourceful. So, really making sure that you're telling the whole story and not just the organization is great and support us. You want the donor to understand their role in public policy, in engaging with your service users, and when that's appropriate and when that's not appropriate, and their own relationship to capitalism, their wealth, their power, and how they interact with your organization as well. One last thing that I would love for you to audit in your storytelling is, are you doing any advocacy? So if you know that your organization is currently approaching a systemic issue through a piecemeal manner, my example is food insecurity with hampers, then bring that other context into your narrative. Really let donors see behind the curtain. So there's some ways that I've done this in the past that have been really great and successful. One of them has been to survey over 200 service users in three different languages, English, Portuguese, and Spanish, and ask them their top three public policy priorities. So we gave them a list of 20 that we thought might be somewhere the organization can support them with. And we asked them, what are the three most important ones? And they said, social assistance rates are too low. They said, I would like my dental care to be covered by the provincial healthcare plan, which would be great. And also, affordable housing was another big issue, right? So now that we had this information directly from our service users, we can inform our donors that these are top three public policy priorities and start talking to our city councilors about what it would be like to actually improve that situation for our community. Some of the challenges when it comes to auditing and then implementing these changes is it's often done off the side of our desk, right? There's usually not a lot of funders that are committed to funding advocacy work. And sometimes donors might not understand all the concepts that you're trying to introduce to them. So I would say really bring that data from your service users to explain the changes that are happening and why they're beneficial for the entire organization, including your donor community, including your board members, your volunteers, to be better aligned on what those priorities are and to move your mission forward in that direction. So we talked a lot about storytelling and auditing that. The second thing that I want you to audit is obviously your fundraising. Status quo major donor stewardship has always been very donor centric, right? Publicly attributing accomplishments or programs to them, naming rights, really doing anything that a donor requests without involving the community, and bending over backwards to make sure that their stewardship is personalized, it's thoughtful, it's consistent, and it's even sometimes expensive for the organization. So that's something that I want you to consider. Are you treating donors the same across the board? So if a volunteer is volunteering full time and they're giving the equivalent of $60,000 worth of time, are you actually doing any stewardship for them? Or are you just treating it as a given? Because I know when a major donor walks in and they say, "Hey, I want to give you $50,000, that gets people's attention and it gets them that personalized touch point. So there's a way to quickly integrate CCF into what you're doing. Same as donor education. So something that I like to do is I don't want to be the only source of truth for my donors. I like to share, here is Boulet's blog, Nonprofit AF. Here's community-centric fundraising in the hub where all these people are writing pieces on what they're thinking about their relationship to fundraising nonprofit into their own donor community. And I also like to have conversations around capitalism, wealth hoarding, white supremacy, and all those issues that are impacting my community members. And I do have another video on how to talk to donors about white supremacy, capitalism, and racism. If you want to check that out, I'll link that at the end. But really start thinking about how you can bring donors along and having them understand that overhead is not a sin. Overhead is what pays the rent and keeps the programs running. Systemic issues aren't going to go away because we're tackling the effects of those issues. We really need to tackle the roots, and we really need people to vote and become engaged citizens for these issues to eventually go away. And then also feel free to gently push back on problematic notions that a donor might have. For example, I once had a donor, they said, "Hey, I want to donate 50 used mismatched socks to your organization because I think that you'd be able to use it." First, we don't accept clothing donations. We don't have the infrastructure to ensure that they're bed bug free or anything like that. So that's first. Second, is this the most dignified thing that we are able to provide our service users? And the answer is no in that case, right? So, really having those conversations with your donors will help them become better allies and better advocates for your cause and actually be able to support your service users in a way that is dignified and aligned with the values of community centric fundraising. I think something else that you can do is revisit donor centric events. So if you have a gala that the tickets are $500 and your service users would, by design, never feel comfortable there, never even be able to purchase a ticket, then that's not really a great mission aligned event. For example, if you are providing camp for kids that have cancer, then your fundraising event, instead of being a fancy gala, could be a camp experience, right? So, how can you ensure that all of your fundraising events actually feel in alignment with what you do? Because that will also bring donors way closer to your organization. You'll be able to provide a very unique experience that no other organization can provide. And you'll be able to bring together your service user community and your donor community in a way that doesn't feel transactional or exploitative, where everyone can just hang out and have a conversation at a picnic or whatever you're trying to do. One final thing that I would love for you to audit in your fundraising is how are you actually engaging with other organizations? So, a way that we did this was partnering up with another similarly sized organization and meeting monthly to discuss how we were implementing each CCF principle. We would swap notes with each other. So, if they were doing something really well, we could learn from them and we could improve our own processes. And if there was something that we were doing really well, we would openly share those templates and resources and even donors. We've had donors ask to be introduced to this partner organization, and we would happily do that. So there's opportunities to collaborate, and there's strength in numbers. Actually, Canada helps put out a study in 2025 that says community building is one of the easiest ways to continue to get donations from people year after year. That is what people are looking for. Volunteers and donors are alike. They're looking for somewhere where they feel a sense of belonging that is in alignment with their values, right? So that is exactly what you're trying to deliver with your fundraising when it comes to your events and with your storytelling when it comes to how you portray the donor and the service user. Once you do that audit, I want you to reflect on these questions. Would a participant be comfortable and respected in the room? Are participants expected to speak, write, or show appreciation to the donor? Do donors have the opportunity to walk in or participate in programming? Do you expect participants to share trauma with your organization? Is your organization doing education or public policy work around systemic issues? Do you push back on problematic notions or comments? Do you get consent from participants? Can they retract their consent at any time? Do you portray participants as helpless people who need to be empowered? Are you a voice for the voiceless? Or do you portray them as capable people who face barriers to opportunities? Do you partner with problematic or voyeuristic donors? Are participants reflected in your communications and organization in general? So usually I do this training live. So we're going to tweak it a little bit to make it make sense for you today. I want you to review the next few scenarios and think, is this aligned with CCF? And because it's not live, I won't be able to give you the right answer. If you need any kind of support, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn and I can provide you my thoughts on each one of these. But I want you to think, how does this apply to your organization? And what are the principles that are at play here? So let's jump into scenario one. A politician hosts a fundraiser for the youth charity you work at and donates a check for $3,000. They ask that before you deposit it, you get a photo of your service users with the check. Is this aligned with CCF or not? Pause here if you're still deciding and don't want to hear my thoughts just yet, because otherwise I'm going to go right into the spoiler territory. So here's what I'm thinking if I'm making this decision as an in house fundraiser. A politician, to me, throws up a little bit of a flag. I want to know what's going on there and why are they interested in coming? Do we have a relationship with them, or is this a transactional photo op that they're looking for? Host a fundraiser for us. Okay, that's good. Thank you. For the youth charity that I work at. Okay, so I'm working for a youth charity in this scenario and they're giving a check from the fundraiser. Okay, that's great. Before I deposit it, they want a photo of our service users with the check. So that for me would be a hard no because my service users are actually children in this scenario and children can't consent to be photographed and who knows what this guy is going to do with this photo of this child in a check, right? Is it just going to go on his social media, his website? Who knows? And it's not really fair for that child to be asked to be make that decision, right? So ideally, you can ask this person, "Hey, I would feel much more comfortable if it was a staff person or a volunteer." That's one. And maybe also ask, "Is there a contingency here? Will we still get the donation if you don't get the photo op?" And assess whether this is a relationship that you want to maintain or not. So I think as is, this is not aligned with CCF, but it could be massaged to get there. Let's jump into scenario two. For your holiday campaign, a longtime corporate donor is going to donate 500 items of your choice and would love for you to share that they made a gift to you on social media. You tell them the items you need, the items come, and you share they made the gift of 500 items on all your platforms. Is this aligned with CCF or not? Pause the video right here before we get into spoiler territory, but I'm going to give you my thoughts right now. So, a long-time corporate donor is something that I feel maybe they've already been sussed out. Maybe they have a really good relationship. Maybe they volunteered. Obviously, it's a really long-term standing relationship. And I like that they're asking me what kind of items the service users would find most helpful. So it gives me an opportunity to go find out what people need and actually tell the corporate partner, we need these items. It's not just donating whatever they think they should give without any kind of understanding of what we do, but it's actually digging deeper and putting agency into the nonprofit's hands. They also said they would love for you to share this on social media. That's not exactly a contingency. They are saying they would love if you did it, but they're not saying you have to do it. So, as is, I think this is aligned with CCF. So, it's hot. Before I jump into the next scenario, I want you to know that there's going to be a link in the description that shows you how my company actually does fundraising in a community centric fundraising aligned manner. Just in case you're struggling with any of this and you want to work with us, the link is always in the description. No worries if not. My biggest thing is that you're getting value from this video and that you're able to implement these changes at your organization. That being said, let's move on to scenario three. Scenario three. A donor approaches you and says they'd be willing to make a six-figure gift for a new program that promotes entrepreneurship among low income individuals. Your organization wouldn't be able to support the program without the donor, and it doesn't meet the most relevant community needs. But you're experiencing a deficit, and the gift will really help fill that gap. You choose not to accept the gift with these restrictions. Is this hot or not? Pause the video if you don't want to hear my thoughts just yet, because I'm going to jump right in. So for me, okay, this donor is willing to make a large gift for a new program. That is not exactly what I'm looking for. I'm probably looking for unrestricted funding for our current programs, right? And promotes entrepreneurship among low income individuals. I don't know if that's what low income individuals need the most. Does the donor? I don't think so. So programming has to be designed by the people who need it most, right? It has to be with them in mind. It can't be by someone who's able to make a six-figure gift, talking about low income individuals, right? Even if they had experienced poverty in the past, it's an outdated timeline. Like, you're not experiencing it currently, and we really need to address the current issues that these people are facing. So that's one issue. And whether you're facing a deficit or not, I would not recommend just starting a program because a donor recommends it. So, as is, I say that this is not aligned with CCF, but I think there's a really good opportunity to align with CCF by having these conversations with the donor and saying, hey, actually, low income people, they need food right now. They don't need entrepreneurship. They don't need something else. They're working three jobs, right? And moving them towards something where you're actually requiring those funds, I think that would help you address the deficit, which you can also talk to the donor about, by the way. They're very understanding and they know things are going on right now. It doesn't build a new program out of nothing for no reason other than the donor's whims. And then it allows the donor to become a true partner in your work and understand how their gift is going to make that impact in the most impactful way possible. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. As I said, that link, if you need support with how to transition your organization to be CCF aligned, will be in the comments down below. But as always, thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe to let the algorithm know that you want more expert fundraising tips. And I would love to hear directly from you. Are you already implementing community centric fundraising? Have you had any roadblocks? What are your donors saying? What are your board members saying? What are the things that really excite you about it? And how can we move this forward more as a whole sector? But that's it for today. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to another episode of The Small Nonprofit. If you want to continue the conversation, feel free to connect with our guests directly or find me on LinkedIn. Let's keep moving money to mission and prioritizing our well being. Bye for now.